Mike Bloomberg music on the Hugh Hewitt Show. I have a riddle for you, Dwayne. Are you ready?
Sure.
It's for the after show. What's the difference between Mike Bloomberg and Custer?
Custer had a chance.
Custer had a plan.
Custer had a plan.
That's my riddle for the day. I'll try that on EJ when he shows up. EJ Dionne coming up after the break. Time for the...
Custer was taller?
Custer was taller. Even after he ran into the Sioux. Coming up after the break, Code Red, EJ Dionne's brand new book. Well, he's got to be drinking a lot of coffee to get ready for this. The business story of the day comes from the Financial Times, brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian. AndrewandTodd.com. Know what else the best movie it was close to? Did you see Quentin Tarantino's The Hateful Eight?
Yes.
Yeah, this was 3/4 of The Hateful Eight.
This was the Loathful Six.
The Loathful Six. Okay. Back to AndrewandTodd.com. China seizes hospitals, hotels, cars to fight coronavirus. Now, AndrewandTodd.com are mortgage lenders with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend you money to buy a house. They help you refinance your house. They help you get money out of the house to consolidate debt. And the rate they can give you depends upon the 10-year Treasury. They don't actually lend money at the rate of the 10-year Treasury. It's the rate at which all other rates are based. And the 10-year Treasury is down to 1.57% as of this morning. I think it's going to go lower today because dawning on people around the world that when you read a headline in the Financial Times, China seizes hotels, hospitals, and cars to fight coronavirus. What does that mean? Disaster. Disaster in China. The South China Morning News says it's a black swan. We don't get it here yet, but it's coming. If not the disease, the market impacts. And that means interest rates will continue to fall, which is why you want to be in line with AndrewandTodd.com. Answer a couple of questions online or call them at 888-888-1172, and they will get you refinanced. They will get you pre-qualified. They will get you the money. They will work you through it. They have the greatest team. I've known them for years. You can trust them, trust them, trust them. Good guys. Talked to Andrew yesterday. Helping a friend out inside the Beltway, along with Gordon Wood, the realtor in Alexandria. I mention it a lot because all those Seattle people who are listening to me in Seattle are moving to Alexandria, and they need a realtor, and they call up Gordon Wood. And then they need a lender, and he sends them to AndrewandTodd.com or vice versa. 888-888-1172. Lawrence O'Donnell on MSNBC last night commented on the Democrats' discussion of health care. Cut number 18.
There's plenty of presidential territory to discuss, and these debates inevitably spend a half an hour on health care legislation, not one sentence of which has a realistic possibility of passing. I heard Pete Buttigieg's strategy for passing his bill. He gave the strategy in New Hampshire. He says he's going to fly into Kentucky to have Kentuckians convince Mitch McConnell to do it. He's going to do that after losing Kentucky by 20 points to Donald Trump. It's pure fantasy world, this whole section of it.
It is pure fantasy world, but it's not as fantasy world as it gets. Gavin Newsom, State of the State in California yesterday, the governor said this, cut 23.
Healthcare and housing can no longer be divorced. After all, what's more fundamental to a person's well-being than a roof over their head? Doctors should be able to write prescriptions for housing the same way they do for insulin and antibiotics.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm writing you a script for housing. That's what Democrats do. Look, in a reality check, go see Justice Thomas. Go see the movie about Justice Thomas. You can find out where it's playing at justicethomasmovie.com. The movie is called Created Equal. Clarence Thomas in his own words. It will inspire you. It will make you laugh. It will make you angry at parts when you see what he had to put up with, the sliming of Clarence Thomas. But it'll make you endure. It will give you courage. It will tell you no matter how down you are, you can fight back. JusticeThomasMovie.com. Michael Beckman, our friend, sent us a review. It's a great movie. Go see Created Equal, Clarence Thomas in his own words, and come back for EJ Dionne. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That's the theme song from Quentin Tarantino's The Hateful Eight. Last night's Democratic debate was 3/4 of that. I'm joined by EJ Dionne, author of the brand new book Code Red, in a perfectly timed appearance because Code Red is what described happened last night on the stage in Vegas. EJ, how are you, my friend?
Well, it's putting aside the George-like music that you introduced me with. It's good to be with you, and it's providential because just yesterday I spoke to your wonderful college roommate, who is, as you know, the former head of the Peace Corps, and I'd like to begin on a sort of a consensual note, which is we both love your college roommate, and we can agree, can we not, that the Peace Corps is one very good agency of the American government.
Indeed it is, and Mark Guerin, who is now the leader of Harvard's Institute of Politics. We can also agree, I believe, that the IOP is a great institution, of which Pete Buttigieg was once the president. I'm sure you've been a visiting fellow there. I resist Mark's blandishments to go up to Cambridge. I'm afraid they won't let me go. If I ever get into Cambridge, I might get thrown in a cell. I'm not sure I'm allowed up there anymore, EJ.
You know, I'll even have you visit. I've been teaching up there. I'll even have you into my class if you come.
Okay. Well,
I might never show up again myself if I ever did that.
Let's talk about Code Red. This is so well timed a book. Very rarely, I've told people for years. I've been doing this show for 20 years, and one of my favorite sequences was a 6-part series we did on Sold Out, your book on faith, Catholicism, and the religious right. It was a terrific book. Code Red is a political book, so let's do the politics first. I have a riddle for you. What's the difference between Mike Bloomberg and Custer?
Go ahead.
Custer had a plan.
Try, Hugh.
Custer had a plan. What happened to Mike Bloomberg last night?
Well, I think what happened, first of all, is he hasn't debated in a very long time, number one. Number two, he hasn't ever, as far as I could tell, debated with that many people on the stage commanding attention. And number three, he has never debated in a circumstance where every single candidate on the stage had an interest in going after him. And I got to say, I was surprised. Bloomberg, I think we would agree on this, too. Bloomberg is a very smart guy. And I was surprised that he was not prepared for some of the things that were thrown at him, some of the criticisms that were thrown at him. And the whole first hour, he just seemed to look like, what am I doing here? Which is kind of a charitable way to look at it. It was just, it was a very bad night for him. The question is, the most interesting comment I think I heard in the commentary after the debate is he just showing up for the debates because he has to, and his whole campaign lies in his extraordinary outpouring of spending on virtually every medium you can imagine. I don't know about you, but when I write, sometimes I like to take breaks, and I play a hearts game on my phone. And one day a Mike Bloomberg ad shows up on my Hearts game, and I said, my God, he's buying everything. But it was clearly not a good night for him if you looked at all the reviews. It was just, he was beaten up very badly.
Frank Bruni said he's seen Chum treated better by white sharks than Bloomberg was. Here's the deal. I know he spent $250 million. He can do it again and again and again. But after a performance like that last night, there will not be another big television event for 10 days. California is voting right now. I've already voted, by the way, EJ, in Virginia. I got to vote absentee because I won't be there on March 3rd. I voted for Bernie Sanders.
For Bernie Sanders, right?
Yes, I did. I voted for Bernie. I want clarity on the stage. Here's what Donnie Deutsch said on MSNBC this morning.
Joe, is anybody anybody panicked besides me in that it does look like Sanders is rolling and that 2/3 of this country thinks we're going in the right direction and you have a guy who wants to burn it down? To me, I just don't see him having any shot in a general election. I'm panicked. I am absolutely panicked.
Are you panicked, EJ Dionne? Does Code Red convey panic?
No, it's not about panic. I remember a political candidate who was once described as having only two speeds, complacency and panic. And I think neither complacency nor panic are good ways to approach politics. But I am concerned, and that's why I wrote the book. The first line of Code Red is will progressives and moderates feud while America burns? And the whole point of the book is to argue that progressives and moderates have far more in common than they often want to know. You know, just to pick one obvious example, they may disagree about single-payer health care, but everybody on that stage last night agrees that we need to, A, defend Obamacare from all these court suits and from efforts to repeal it, but B, we need to cover every single American with decent, affordable health care. Some want to do it with a public option. Others want to do it with a single payer. AOC said the other day that if you start with a strong bargaining position, single payer, and you ended up with a public option, what's so bad about that? I took that. I liked to think, although I doubt it's true, that AOC had read my book, although I hope she does. So I think that I'm torn about this question, which is, on the one hand, you can say every primary gets bitter at some point. Look what happened in 2016, and look at the attacks on Trump, and yet he won the Electoral College. Some of this just normally happens. On the other hand, I am concerned that if a huge wedge is driven into the party by itself, it'll be harder in November. So concerned but not panicked is my position, and that's why I wrote a whole book.
No, EJ, we've run into each other in the halls of MSNBC enough that you won't remember this, but the very first time we met in person was in line at the 2004 Fleet Center Democratic Convention after John Kerry had come over on the boat, the same time that Barack Obama gave that amazing speech that brought the rafters down, a very united convention around a candidate who almost pulled it off. I'm not going near the Milwaukee meltdown that's coming, because when the Democrats take the nomination away from Bernie Sanders, and they will take it away from him in the second round, the party's going to split. It's going to be like Robert Peel repealing the corn laws. I know that's going to happen. Does Code Red say that's what's going to happen if you take it away from Bernie? He's got the most delegates.
No, actually, Code Red is a very strong appeal to people on the left of the party, and an argument for the need, in favor of the need for more moderate Democrats and the left to work together. The example I cite, which you'll remember as somebody who knows a lot about history, is the relationship between Sidney Hillman and the old CIO and Franklin Roosevelt.
Yep.
Under Roosevelt, the left, on the one hand, put pressure on Roosevelt to move in a more progressive direction, and on the other hand, gave him critical support because Roosevelt was broadly progressive, was broadly a friend of the trade union movement, and they wanted him to defeat the right. And what I'm arguing for in the book is that the left and the center need each other. There are two people I talk about quite a lot in the book, two members of the class of 2018, the Democratic class. One is Abigail Spanberger, who won a Tea Party district out near Richmond, a former CIA agent. The other is Ayanna Pressley, who won a primary, a progressive Democrat, a member of the squad. What I argue is that Pressley and Spanberger need each other as part of this coalition. And I hope that by the time that convention comes, and I hope you come and visit anyway, by the time that convention comes, Democrats will realize that defeating Trump in this moment is far, far more important than anything that divides them.
David Plouffe, 13 seconds ago, tweeted out, he said this on MSNBC, quote, Bernie Sanders, in all likelihood, is the nominee unless it gets taken away from him at the convention. Now, you saw Chuck Todd ask the question last night, EJ, of everyone. 5 out of 6 said, let it play out. The person with the most delegates doesn't get the nomination. Bernie said, of course, the person with the most delegates gets the nomination because he's going to have the most delegates. What's going to happen to your party when they take it away from Bernie?
Just by the way, if I recall right, I saw on Twitter last night, Bernie had a slightly different position 4 years ago, but which is just worth mentioning. I'm not where David is yet. In fact, we had a chat about this in New Hampshire, and God knows he's a smart guy and knows how campaigns work. But a lot depends on, for example, whether some of these moderate candidates hit 15%
yep.
and get a share of delegates in California. I think the big difference between Bernie and the Democrats this year and Trump and the Republicans is that Republicans had a lot of winner-take-all primaries.
Yep.
So that Trump got, as I recall, somewhere around 28% of the vote in South Carolina, but he took all the delegates. Proportionality means that a lot of these moderate candidates, until that their part of the party winnows down, a lot of these candidates are going to be taking delegates. That will keep Bernie's total down. It wouldn't shock me if at the end of Super Tuesday, Bernie does have a delegate lead, but there's still a long way to go between Super Tuesday and the end of the process.
Now, EJ, I've walked behind you. You hum Kumbaya. I mean, you're just a get along with everyone guy. Did you watch Buttigieg and Klobuchar? I thought we might have had to have the police go up on that stage. It was they're not coming together.
I couldn't resist tweeting at that point that these people, I was very mild compared to what was going on Twitter, that these people just don't seem to like each other.
No, they don't.
And no, I think and Klobuchar has made it clear that she, as somebody who's been in politics for a long time, wonders why Pete, who has been the mayor of South Bend, is there next to her. I think from Pete's point of view, he just asks a pointed question because in many ways, I think this is just a fact analytically, Klobuchar took New Hampshire away from Pete. If you looked at where the numbers were going after the Iowa caucuses, he was in a position to surge past Bernie in New Hampshire. And then with her great debate performance up there, it created the Klobuchar surge. She took a lot of Joe Biden's votes. And I think the demographics of their constituencies were remarkably similar, except Klobuchar's was a little older. So they are natural opponents. Even whatever they feel about each other, they're fighting for the same part of the party.
Yeah, the scorpion and the frog in the Nile. Last question, EJ. It's going to be Donald Trump re-election. You know he's going to win. How are you going to do with the next 4 years? Have you got it in you to stay in the fight, my friend? Happy warrior that you are.
Oh, I'll never leave the fight as long as God gives me voice. But I don't agree with your premise. I look at Trump's numbers, and as I said at the beginning, even with the slight improvement in some of the surveys, I think a majority of Americans want to replace Trump. And I think that majority is sufficient to carry the swing states. The Democrats have to make it easier rather than harder for them. I'm not sure last night's debate made it easier for them, but there's time.
I must tell you, I'm from northeastern Ohio, 7 miles from western Pennsylvania. Bernie does not carry western Pennsylvania. Elizabeth Warren doesn't carry Ohio or Michigan. EJ, into the opposition again. It's like Peel splitting the party, the Tories. Always good to talk to you. Code Red in bookstores now. You can't forget that title, America. Go find out what a sensible, happy warrior Democrat thinks. Code Red by EJ Dionne. Don't forget as well, honorboundcoffee.com, and don't forget relieffactor.com. Maybe I should send some to EJ. Relieffactor.com, Icarian, curcumin, omega, and resveratrol. Together, those 4 supplements make it easier for you to get older, to get roughed up like Mike Bloomberg got rolled over last night, and take a pratfall or 2, and you'll still feel good. Relieffactor.com supports the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains that accompany aging and exercise. And you're definitely doing both in your life. You can't escape it, but you can mitigate the consequences of it by going out and getting relieffactor.com. $19.95 is a starter pack. Join the tens of thousands of people who take it every morning. And if you forgot to take it, turn around, go back in. Don't begin your commute without it. It's too long of a time in the car. You need relieffactor.com. Come back. Steve Kornacki of MSNBC joins me and gives us the rundown on what the numbers look like after the Bloomberg meltdown last night. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt playing Mike Bloomberg music. Joined now by Steve Kornacki of NBC, political analyst extraordinaire. Hello, Steve. Good morning.
Good morning, Hugh. How you doing?
Good. My riddle of the morning. What is the difference between Mike Bloomberg and Custer?
What is the difference?
Custer had a plan. How bad? How bad was that last night for the mayor?
Yeah, I mean, you're almost getting to that sort of existential question now about, do debates matter anymore? If they do, to the extent that they do, Bloomberg, I think, walked away with what no candidate wants, and that is that sort of devastating clip that's probably going to be played over and over again of that, a moment with Elizabeth Warren there, and her really pressing him on those non-disclosure agreements. Him really, I think, you say having a plan. It did not look like he anticipated that topic coming up, that topic being pressed the way it was, and really it just becomes a question of the damage from this. Is it forgotten, just given how quickly political news moves these days, and can the damage be undone by $400 or $500 million of ad spending? That's probably the big question now.
No, I don't know how one estimates the monetary value of wall-to-wall coverage on all the cable networks. On talk radio, I've done nothing but 3 hours, played the very clip you've talked about Bloomberg. It undoes a lot of that in the middle of voting. California is voting en masse around the clock via absentee at early voting locations. So are Super Tuesday states. South Carolina is already voting. Can Bloomberg buy his way back to double digits in these places?
See, that's the thing. The way I look at this, I think the challenge Bloomberg had is it still has. It's an added one. He's bought his way into contention, it looks like, in some of these Super Tuesday states, but he's also playing from behind here. I mean, that's what happens when you sit out the first four contests. We're going to have whatever happens on Saturday in Nevada, it won't involve Mike Bloomberg. He's not contesting it. Won't be getting any votes out of South Carolina, won't be getting any delegates out of South Carolina. He's already playing from behind. And I think you've got the potential here for Sanders, to bank some delegates, to bank some votes in these early states, to get some momentum from these early states. Like you're saying, the voting's going on out there in California. Every poll I've seen out of California has Bernie Sanders ahead. The only question is how much, and some polls have him ahead significantly out there. So what Bloomberg has got to do in some of these states here, I think, is not just win, but win big. Win big in a way where he can sort of counter the advantage that Sanders is building here. Win big where he can clear out the rest of the field quickly. He can convince Biden and Klobuchar and Buttigieg and all the others that they got to get out, and they got to get out soon. So I think getting 20-25% in some of these states, I think that's still on the table with him, just given his spending. But I think he's in a position now where to make a real run at Sanders, to really have a shot at consolidating a non-Sanders role in this thing, the consensus non-Sanders role, he's got to be winning big in some of these places. And I think there's a question here: did he cost himself an opportunity for that?
Now, what really comes onto my radar, Steve Kornacki, is the possibility, because you need 15% to get a delegate in California. Is the field so divided between the five candidates not named Sanders that Sanders gets all of California's delegates because everyone's at 12 and 13% except for Bernie?
It's funny. I've been playing with scenarios around that. So the way they do it, there and everywhere, there's a pool of statewide delegates, and then there's a pool that's a little bit bigger that's given out by congressional district. So if you look at, there was a poll out this week that had Sanders 32 and the second place candidate at 13, so nobody else hitting that threshold. If you got that result in the primary, Sanders would get all of the statewide delegates. That'd be 144 statewide delegates. The rest would be given out in congressional districts, and it would be a case of, well, in this district, Sanders got 50%. In this district, he got 35, and somebody got 20. So I think the possibility, if he's the only one hitting 15% statewide, I think you're looking at the possibility of him walking away with 300 delegates, out of California, something like that. An opportunity there. That's where he could bank a really big lead. And you saw that at the end of that debate last night when Chuck Todd, asked these candidates, should the nomination go to whoever has the most delegates at the end of the process, even if it's not an outright majority. You saw Sanders quickly say yes. I think California is one of the things he has in his mind when he says that.
Well, I thought the Chuck Todd question was the question because 5 said no. I called this three-quarters of the Quentin Tarantino movie, The Hateful Eight, because three-quarters of them were going at each other. What happens, Steve Kornacki, if Bernie has a sizable delegate lead and they take it away from him in a Milwaukee meltdown. What happens to the party?
That's the part that I have a hard time seeing. I mean, it reminds me a bit of those final days of the Republican race in 2016 when there was still theoretically, remember these unpledged delegates who could rise up and keep Trump from getting the nomination, and you heard people keeping that alive. But just realistically, what you saw for the Republicans in 16 was if you've gone through the primary process, if there is a clear preference from the voters of the party, through the popular vote, through the pledged delegates, through all of that, the idea of taking it away, you realize quickly you're just going to tear the party apart. And I think if it's one thing if Sanders gets through this process and, let's say his lead is 20 pledged delegates and it's a real muddle and nobody's, distinguished themselves and really broken away. I think that may be one scenario, but if you're dealing with a scenario where he's got 40% or something, hard for me to see it.
I agree. Steve Kornacki, always a pleasure. Follow him on Twitter at Steve Kornacki. Watch him on NBC, MSNBC. And follow me tomorrow. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Generalissimo. Thanks all of you for listening to this Hugh Hewitt Show.